Good evening, class. My name is Christian. I will begin with the economic issue. The affirmative claims legalizing prostitution would benefit the economy. My response to that is prostitution would not bring any economic advantages. Farley M., an economist who wrote in the Journal of Trauma Practice, Prostitution and Trafficking in 9 Countries, wrote, in the face of a lack of education and employment opportunities and discrimination against women on the labor market, the decision to start selling sex may have economic drivers. In fact, according to the literature and the international documents consulted, homelessness, economic urgent need, and lack of sufficient resources are the primary causes for people to enter prostitution. Women in such situations are more likely to become victims of sexual exploitation. M. Farley's interviews with 785 people in prostitution in 9 countries showed that 89% of them wanted to escape prostitution but had no other options for survival. Prostitution is not a substantially popular occupation with no motivation to want to be in the occupation. There's not really going to be any revenue for the government with taxation. Another source I found with this is Markovich M., an economist who wrote in the Guide to the UN Convention. In addition to the violence experienced by women selling sex, the notion of vulnerability based on poverty has facilitated the look at women in prostitution as victims. In the debate, some argue, therefore, that most, if not all, women selling sex were in need of protection because they were either forced into prostitution violently or because of the lack of income alternatives. Again, this supports the fact that it's not a very popular occupation. Also, the economic benefits with legalization are outweighed by criminal opportunities. And the affirmative claims, decriminalization and regulation of prostitution would decrease violence. Regulation of prostitution does not keep women safe. Schulze E., who wrote in the International Herald Tribune, German prostitutes ponder salaried work, he wrote, one goal of legalized prostitution was to move prostituted women indoors into brothels and clubs where they would be allegedly less vulnerable than in street prostitution. However, many women are in street prostitution because they want to avoid being controlled and exploited by pimps, transformed in legalized systems into businessmen. Prostitutes aren't really being treated right by their own bosses, the businessmen, and they're being abused as well. In a study Van Wesenbeek made from the Amsterdam University Press, he found in the Netherlands, where prostitution is legal, 60% of prostituted women suffered physical assaults. 70% experienced verbal threats of physical assault, 40% experienced sexual violence, and 40% have been forced into prostitution or sexual abuse by acquaintances. Again, the Netherlands legalized prostitution, and prostitutes are still suffering with these threats and violent acts by criminals. Women will have even less control in private venues. Martin L., who wrote The Compassionate Detective, the Herald, wrote, countering the argument that legalized prostitution would provide safer venues for women, he noted that women in sauna prostitution, for example, have even less control over what services they will perform. On the street, very few women will do anal sex, and few do sex without a condom. But in the saunas, the owners, who obviously don't want their punchers going away disappointed, decide what the women would do. And very often that is anal sex and sex, oral and vaginal, without a condom. Prostitutes aren't really going to have a choice when they're in a private venue, such as the affirmative wants to do. Regulation of that will give the bosses that much more power in order to have the prostitutes paid. The job of a prostitute is unsafe. Hunter S.K., who wrote in the Michigan Journal of Gender and Law, says, it is not possible to protect the health of someone whose job means that they will get raped on an average once a week. The affirmative claims regulation of prostitution would decrease health issues. I say health issues arise as a result of violence in prostitution. Farley M. Conducted a study that carried out across 9 countries in 2003 showed that a majority of prostitutes had experienced severe forms of violence, including sexual assaults and rape. In most of the cases, they experienced various types of repeated violence. A large proportion, 68%, had suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, with a level of severity comparable to that experienced by Vietnam War veterans, as well as psychological dissociation. These are huge risks that prostitutes in legalized countries have to deal with, and it is 68% is just a really high number of them. Raymond J., who conducted a comparative study of women trafficked in the migration process, says safety policies in brothels did not protect women from harm. Where brothels allegedly monitored the buyers and employed bouncers, women stated that they were injured by buyers and at times by brothel owners and their friends. Even when someone intervened to momentarily control buyers' abuse, women lived in a climate of fear. Although 60% of women reported that buyers had sometimes been prevented from abusing them, half of those same women answered that nonetheless, they thought they might be killed by one of their buyers. Again, that supports the fact that prostitutes are in a very dangerous environment, even in private venues. I hope that you would agree that legalizing prostitution would not give any economic benefits, it would not decrease violence or health issues.